Alright, so today is the day that I actually start pairing up my ball pythons, and take a look at Bobby, how blue Bobby is. He's almost kind of pinkish blue, really deep into shed. I've never really seen him so far into shed. That is pretty crazy. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to pair up Bobby this year. He is getting the year off from breeding season. He's just going to be in front of the camera for the whole time. And I spent the last 3 hours sitting down with Excel, putting all my snakes into it, figuring out all my pairings, putting some of my new holdbacks into the spreadsheet and getting everything ready. And I wanted to show you how I organize my breeding season for my ball pythons. It's pretty interesting. You're kind of looking behind the scenes at what people do as far as figuring out which snakes to pair up and how to organize everything. I think it's the hardest part. And I think a lot of people, what they do is they'll actually have a card on every single tub, and then they'll move that card with the snake, and then they'll make notes on the cards. I definitely don't do it that way. I pretty much follow a spreadsheet. I don't really know of anyone who does it like I do. I've seen some people kind of do like a chalkboard. They'll put everything on a chalkboard, and I've seen multiple ways. Some people use electronic databases, and everything, sometimes something happens, they'll scan it and it'll go into their computer and into the database, and they'll track it that way. And I thought in this video I'd show you kind of behind the scenes how I track my breeding of my ball pythons. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Microsoft Excel, and I'd say most people probably use Excel to do stuff like your budget or calculations. And in this case, I'm simply making tables and entering information just so I can track the progress of everything that's going on. So the first thing I do is I make a table with my males to see which males I want to add to the rotation of my breeding program. As a matter of fact, I have 14 males that are ready to go out of the chute, and I pretty much pared it down to just 10 males. The ones on the bottom, I'd say Bobby here on the top, the one that's not going to be used, he's pretty much been replaced with my bamboo lesser up here. And the bamboo lesser, keep in mind, it's allelic, so if you breed it to even a normal ball python, half the babies come out bamboo, half the babies come out lessers. So with Bobby, he's just a straight bamboo. You breed it to a normal, you get 50% bamboo, but you also get 50% normals out of the mix. And it seemed like this year I had an incredible amount of normals. I'm trying to pare down the number of normals that I'm actually producing to get some higher end snakes in my hatchlings. And the spider pied is, I think I'm going to limit the number of spiders that I'm actually producing. As a matter of fact, I'm breeding my Pastel spider desert ghost because I really want to get some visual desert ghost babies to hold some of that back. And it seems like I keep getting more and more snakes, and pretty much you have to make a decision where you're going to cut it and where are you going to, if you're going to keep expanding or if you're going to replace and upgrade as you go. And that is always the hardest part. And then I have the scaleless head here. The scaleless head, I bought it a few years ago, bred it through my collection, and got a whole bunch of scaleless head stuff that's really cool. Pretty much taking them out of the rotation. I have 2 scaleless head 50% head caramel albinos. I want to breed those back to a couple females that are 100% het caramel albino to see if I can actually produce the visual caramel albino scaleless head, which would be really awesome. And since it's 50%, there's 50% chance that either one of these have 1 copy of the caramel albino gene. And I wanted to add 1 more snake to those odds to make sure out of these 3 snakes, hopefully I'll get 1 with the caramel albino gene in there. And pretty much what I'll do is, as soon as I find one that is for sure has the gene in there and makes a visual caramel albino, I'll probably unload these other 2 and then just work with the ones. As a matter of fact, I might just keep the caramel albino visual scaleless head and work with that instead of working with some of these other heads. So those are my males. I have essentially 10 males that I'm working into my rotation. So over here I have my females, and the female list is a lot longer than my males. Take a look at all these females. As a matter of fact, I have 34 females that I'm using as breeders. It is pretty incredible. And pretty much all the ones in the bottom here are not going to be in the rotation this year. There's some ones that I held back from last year. Of course, the females take at least 2 or 3 years in order to be ready, so I'm not really, these are about 1 year old, so they're definitely not ready. And then I have a couple that I bought into that are not quite up to size. One of them's 3 years old and a really picky eater, still not ready to breed. And then I have 4 more here. These are the ones that have been fasting that are underweight. You see my list is starting to pare down quite a bit as I go through these. And then I have a few up here. I have 3 that the weight is borderline. So I kind of went through my whole collection. I was picking up all my females. I was thinking, all right, is this female big enough to lay eggs? Does she have the body condition? And some of them were borderline, and then what really sways my decision is if they've been eating really heavily the last few weeks. Then I'll say, yes, they are ready to breed. And then these, they're kind of borderline. I'm thinking maybe they could lay eggs, but they were fasting for a long time, haven't eaten in a long time. So I'm going to take them out of the rotation and give them the year off. So I'm down to 18 females, 18 females and 10 males. So that's what you have to do, is you have to go through your collection and you have to pare it down. And a lot of people think ball pythons will breed every single year. As a matter of fact, out of these 18, I'd probably still be lucky to get 14 or 15 clutches, because there's always a few that you pair up and they still don't go. So I'm paring down my 34 down to probably 15 this year by the time the season's done and I get some eggs. So what I do from here is I actually changed my schedule quite a few times. Let me show you what I started with. Actually, this is what I started with a few years ago. This was a really confusing schedule. I put all my males up here, and then I put my available females. This year I actually had 23 females. That was a really good year. A lot of them went too. It was pretty amazing. And then I had 5 down here that were too young. And essentially what I did is I paired them all up. I was tracking the weights initially, and I don't think it's really good to determine if they're ready to breed, if the females are ready to breed based on the weight. You really have to take into consideration the weight and if they've been feeding and the body condition. So I have some that I'm taking out of the rotation. They definitely are 1,500 grams. Some of them are 2,000 grams, but they're super skinny, really big skinny snakes that haven't eaten in a long time. You really have to have a visual inspection of each snake to figure out if they're gonna lay. And then what I did is, this is actually in 2017, I was using this old schedule, and if you look through here, I had all the dates and all the pairings, and the problem is you'd get behind on the dates, and I was actually separating for the weekend. I found the weekend is not enough time to separate the females. Essentially what you need to do is you need to separate and feed and then wait at least 3 days, and it kind of threw my whole schedule off, because if you put them back into the rotation right after you feed, a lot of times they'll regurgitate and you'll have problems like that. So the dates on here are kind of meaningless. This was trying to cram too much into a weekend. It wasn't enough time. And the other thing is for example, if you paired up a snake for 2 days and at the end of 2 days it was still locked up, it would go into the 3rd day and it would throw off your schedule even more. So this whole schedule was kind of, I mean, at the end of the schedule, I actually printed out every single page all the way to the end, all the way over here, and then the end of the breeding season. And then I since changed from that. It's a lot less work. This is my new schedule over here. And it is a 1-page schedule, a 10-day rotation, and this is how I have it set up. So I have all the females right here, and then the males I work in, I prefer to do 3 days at a time, and if I'm really in a crunch like I did here on my bamboo lesser, I wanted to breed it to multiple females, I could do 2 days on each female through the rotation. Now remember, at the end of the 2 days here, if they're still locked up, I can actually go into the following day where it won't throw off my schedule, because these are like just generic days. It doesn't really have to be 10 days. You can roll it out a lot longer than this. It doesn't have to be within this timeline. And then I pretty much went every 3 weeks for running this rotation. So I'd run 10 days through here. Well, essentially what I do is I'd run the 6 days. This is pretty much 1 week on, and then it was 3 weeks off is what I would do. And I would take this schedule right here and I would print it for every single week in the breeding season. And So actually I would print one for every, I guess it was one for every 4 weeks, because you'd pair up for 1 week and then you'd have 3 weeks off. So you'd have one sheet for every 4 weeks of breeding. So it wasn't that many sheets of paper, and I actually took a little binder clip and put them on them and wrote the date when I should start pairing for that page. And then on day one, what I would do is I go through here and make sure the Coral Glow was with my Pastel Pinstripe female number 1, and then the Fire Pied with the Pied female. And what I do is I pair up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 snakes on day 1. You can come over here to day 2, it's exactly the same thing. So you really don't have to do anything on day 2. And then on day 3, there's only one snake that's different. So you see, this is really easy. Once you throw those snakes in with the females, you really don't have to do very much for 3 days. And then on day 4, everything switches. And then on day 7, you remove all the males. And it's a really simple process. And the other thing I was kind of tracking over here for a while that's kind of interesting to do if you have an ultrasound, and that is the follicle size with an ultrasound. So it's pretty much towards the end of the breeding season. This is actually November, January, February when they start building follicles. You can actually go in with an ultrasound and see what the size of the immature eggs are inside of the snake. And I know a lot of people are looking for sheds and all looking for all these signs, you know, the glow before the go and all that. And what I actually use is I use the follicle size, and that's it. I ignore pretty much everything else. And then you come down here to February and you can see I essentially what I do is I sort by follicle size, and then I know which snake is gonna lay first. So you see pretty much around 40, 45, you gotta keep a close eye on because those eggs are coming soon. Anything above 20 usually is gonna go. So in early February you can see there's actually multiple snakes that are gonna go for sure. And pretty much what I do is I look at maybe the top 3 or 4, and then I peek in the tub every single day as I'm walking into the snake room. And I'm always looking for eggs, trying to catch them as soon as they come out. So I pretty much time it based on the follicle size. And then another interesting thing that I track over here, which you might want to track, this is just essentially multiple tabs down here, all in the same workbook in Excel. This is what I track. I track the number of eggs, the number of slugs, the number that were egg bound, the number of bad eggs, and I was actually doing the date laid and the expected hatch date. I was actually writing down the date hatched, but I found it was plus or minus kind of a week anyways. It doesn't really matter, you know, because they you know, some of them start peeping out, and then, you know, about a week or 2 later, you're going through and pulling snakes out of the incubator. So it's kind of a wide window for date hatch. I don't really track that anymore, but the date expected to hatch, that is pretty much what I consider the birth date. Pretty much 60 days after the date laid, that's when they're gonna hatch. And you can see I had a really good year. This year I had 13 clutches, total of 105 eggs, and I had 8 bad eggs. As a matter of fact, I had 3 that were egg bound over here for my jungle woman spider. And I actually had quite a few slugs, not too bad. As a matter of fact, last year I only had 2 slugs out of over 100 eggs. And then pretty much had 97 eggs with a total of 92% good eggs. So that was pretty good. Another tab here on the very end is kind of my wish list. That is kind of interesting too. So this, you know, I always think, all right, if I want to invest in a project, what am I gonna buy into? And it's, instead of actually buying it, I like to make a wish list, because sometimes that wish list actually changes, and sometimes I'm glad I didn't buy into some of that stuff. So this is like the Asphalt Yellow Belly project. Tri-Stripe is a really good project. The Axanthic, the Sunset, Black Pastel Pied, looking for going for the super Black Pastel Pied, which is the Panda Pied. The Super Orange Dream is another, the high intensity Super Orange Dream. The Super Cinnamon Champagne, the gray matter, that is an awesome project. And the Ultra Males with the bamboo, that is the coolest bamboo combo I've ever seen. So it's kind of cool to go over on Morph Market, kind of shop around, and then put a wish list at the end of your breeding records, just to kind of, so you can play around and figure out what you actually are thinking about buying into, even though you don't have the cash to buy into it. Alright, so I want to start pairing up my males and my females starting today. Today is the day, and in preparation of pairing them up, what I did is I increased the food on my females. So you can see all the little clips on the little tubs. The clips on the right, they're eating rodents. Every single clip is for one rodent. I was actually feeding twice a week instead of once a week. Sometimes I was feeding 3 in a week if they were really aggressive feeders. Some of them are really getting beefy, and that's really what you want right before the breeding season. It's a trigger that triggers the females. And if you're wondering what a really nice, look at all the clips on this one. Lots of clips all on the tub. This one has been pounding the rats. This is a big old pinstripe. Look at how big and beefy she is. That is what you want your females to look like going into the breeding season. Nice and big and plump. And that one will almost for sure lay a clutch of eggs. I can almost guarantee it. And then what I do right before I put the males in, what I'm actually going to do tonight is I'm going to go through and I'm going to change all the substrate, put in fresh substrate, and then start cycling the males through the females. Alright, so here's another snake that was kind of on the edge. I wasn't sure if she was going to go. She's been fasting for a long time, and just in the last couple weeks, she started really pounding the rodents, eating quite a few. This is my Pastel Spider Desert Ghost female. Look at how beautiful that snake is. She is a beauty. She is pretty, I'd say she's pretty much right on the cusp of having the good body condition, but since she's eating really heavy, I decided to pair up and put her in the rotation this year. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And DVL Exotics asks, have I tried rabbits or guinea pigs for Lucy? And that is a very good question. Lucy is my 80-pound reticulated python. She could definitely take a rabbit. She might even take a pig or a small goat. She could eat a really big meal. But I bought those reticulated pythons to eat all the rats from my rat breeding operation. The problem is if I started feeding rabbits, then I would have to sell all my older rats here coming out of my rat racks. And the hard part about rats when they get old is a lot of people don't really want the big rats. It's a pretty hard sell. I'd say most people have smaller snakes. The pet stores will take a few, but they won't take a whole lot. And that is why I bought the reticulated pythons, to use up those. So I would have a problem with extra rats, and I would have the expense of rabbits. And I'd say feeding rats, it takes a little bit longer, but she definitely gets full with multiple rats. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.